Hey everyone, Tariq here, personal finance coach, and today we're going to be reacting to a little video kind of talking about the current housing market, the current housing crisis, because if you live in the United States these days, rent is pretty high, and this is a pretty big issue lots of people are talking about. And so we have this real estate expert breaking stuff down. Let's take a look at it, see what she says that's valid, see what she says that isn't valid, and just see if it's good information. Let's hop into it.
I'm Kate Nellisher. I'm a professor of urban planning. Let's answer some questions from the internet. This is housing support. At Ethan to go says, why does rent have to go up every year, but my salary doesn't? Sad face. That's really disappointing. So if we look back to 1995 to now, the percentage increase is almost 100% increase in the amount of rent people are paying. But income doesn't increase as quickly. Of course, rents increase.
So this is a very good graph that really shows kind of the long-term benefits of home ownership. So as you can see here, she's very right. Rent increases usually outpace income increases, and really that's due to lots of many factors, market forces, what's happening in the world, housing supply. But what it really comes down to, regardless of whatever is happening in the world, there's one thing you can control when it comes to this idea of renting and rent going up, is home ownership, which is a long-term plan. But the idea is, like, when you own your home, you don't have to worry about rent going up. Once you own your home, you pay off your mortgage, you have that going, you don't have to worry about rent increasing over and over and over and not being able to afford it and being priced out of places. And that's why I always preach home ownership as a long-term plan. I think it's perfect to rent for the short term, but this is a perfect reason why renting long-term may not be great, because rent can always go up. You don't really have control of what people are doing. I know in some states like New York, there's rent control, but really this is kind of the big thing you're going to be dealing with over long periods of time, are those crazy rent increases.
With inflation, but this is more than that. A lot of the low-cost units are disappearing from the market because they have transitioned to luxury housing. Landlords are charging more and more based on upgrades they've made, or they've transitioned to for-sale homes. There's also been an increase in what's called institutional investment. These are corporations buying up homes and also multifamily residential buildings.
So now I do think there should be limits on what corporations can do when it comes to buying real estate, because at the end of the day, you need to house humans. You can't get around it. And the idea that corporations can buy so much housing that humans won't be able to afford to live in them, I think it's crazy. Like the idea that there are empty rooms in some luxury high-rise versus people living on the street, I think there should be no world with that level of inequality and corporate greed takes over. And that is kind of where we are right now.
To rent them out to make a profit. In 2001, only about 18% of rental units were owned by corporations. Today, that's about 50%. So it's really likely that you're paying your rent to a corporate landlord. At Gareth McDade asks, is there a housing emergency or not? We are in a housing emergency, and we're also in a housing crisis. A housing emergency is actually a...
So from what I understand, we are in a housing crisis and / housing emergency, but this has existed for a long time. Let's see what she says about this.
Legal term. If a vacancy drops below 5%, the municipality can declare a state of emergency, and that allows them to access all these different kinds of policies. Rent stabilization, rent control are examples of this. A healthy housing market has above 5% vacancy.
So when she mentioned rent control, if you guys don't know what rent control is, it's basically the idea that a law states that a landlord can't raise the rent of a certain apartment above a certain level, depending on when the apartment was owned. And so that's why in New York, there are some people who are like locked in to these $900 a month apartments who've lived there forever because they got in a good time, and rent control stops rent from going out of control. But again, not every state has that.
Vacancy rate. The vacancy rate in New York City is actually 1.4% right now. Anything that charges less than $2,400 a month in rent, the vacancy rate is actually 0.4 to 0.8, a very low vacancy rate. I Love B43 asks, why are houses so expensive? Houses are really expensive right now. Number one, it's a supply and demand issue. The US is short about 4 million homes to meet the current demand, and a scarcity of any commodity means the price goes up, up, up. In fact, 2020
Right. And just to add on to that, that's always been the nature of housing in general. It's always a supply and demand issue. Whenever you see high fluctuations in the market when it pertains to price, usually, unless, something like COVID or something crazy is happening in the world, it's usually can be tracked to a supply and demand issue. So what I mean to say is, don't look at outside factors like the election or COVID all the time to say this is why housing is so expensive. Usually it's just enough houses are not being built. And for us, that really comes down to lobbying to our politicians, to figuring out ways to get housing, more affordable housing in areas so we can bring down the cost of housing for everyone.
2023 was the least affordable year ever to buy houses in the United States. Interest rates are increasing. It's very expensive to invest in development projects. And it also encourages developers to develop luxury housing rather than more affordable housing. Because this wealthy market exists, developers are building to target that market. They're building very expensive luxury homes. That means that other housing isn't getting built. So everyone's prices increase as a result of more luxury development. At True NYJet GC asks, why are cities not using these abandoned towers to create affordable or homeless housing? What the is wrong with this country? Depending on the age and condition of the building, sometimes it can actually be more economically viable to demolish the building and build something new. Older office buildings or pre-war office buildings, ventilation required that windows be provided for every office space. So it's easier to convert these older office buildings to residential because they're already laid out like our residential buildings. Newer buildings are very difficult to convert to residential, and it's very expensive.
And this is another issue that's just caused by corporations buying lots of real estate. And you have unused, newer buildings that are hard to make into affordable housing. And so the question is, what do we do about this? And really, I don't have the greatest solution, but I think building awareness to know that this is happening is the first step
to do this. If you want to convert this into a residential building, you have to replace all of these windows. You can't have a bedroom without an opening window. You would have to puncture a hole in the middle of the building to provide window access, reconfigure all of the plumbing in the building to hook up to all of the individual bathrooms and kitchens, change the electricity supply, change the HVAC systems. So this requires just completely transforming the inside guts of these buildings. In New York City, there's about 94 million square feet of unused office space.
That's crazy.
That's equivalent to all of the office space in Dallas and Houston combined. It's a huge amount of vacant space right now, and we have to figure out what to do with it. At High for Housing says, what housing technologies are here to stay? Modular? Modular housing can also be referred to as prefab. Different components will be manufactured in different manufacturing sites. They're all brought back to the site, and
so they're kind of getting into the idea of manufactured homes. And the reason why I personally don't think this is a great solution to the housing crisis is because essentially when you build a house, and you can see in the foundation here, there's a level between the house and the ground. When you build a manufactured home or a double wide or a trailer home, you don't own the ground that the home is on. And so in a sense, it's not a great investment like a regular home because the value of that asset is not going to go up over time. And this has become really popular. You'll see all these cheap double wides for $200K, $300K. But I wouldn't fall into this trap because this isn't going to be a great long-term asset for you. And you may avoid the cost of rent over time, but in terms of an investment, you're kind of throwing your money away in a sense. Anyone who's considering this, I would strongly consider you guys wait for a better opportunity to buy a real home. Because when you buy a home where you own the dirt that it's on, usually that goes up in value. But this is an option that people are using. And on that note, I wanted to show you guys this image. So if you take a look here, you'll kind of get an image of fixed mortgage rates versus median home prices. And this is kind of give you guys more context on what's currently happening in the housing market. If you look over time, people will say interest rates are really high right now, but actually it's pretty low compared to that time around the 80s. And there are differences in terms of people's average salary and the proportion to rent and mortgage, your monthly mortgage payment at that time. But other way you see that regardless of what has happened to interest rates, you'll see that housing prices have continued to gone up and up and up. And so what a lot of people might look at is say, interest rates are really high right now. I don't want to hop into a house. But this is really just to show you that interest rates are kind of independent of home prices. The idea of a home, when you buy a home, you want that asset to go up in value. You'd want this to happen for everybody's home, or else what's the point of buying it as an appreciating asset? And this is just to give you more clarity over kind of what's happening in the market. And because interest rates are so high and housing prices are the highest they've ever been, they've also increased at a very high rate in the last few years compared to the years prior. Manufactured homes and modular homes have gotten very popular, but they don't have the same rate of return as a regular housing asset.
And assembled kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. The manufacturing can take place where labor is cheaper, and it also doesn't disturb the neighborhood as much. Another newish building technology that I'm really excited about is something called mass timber, where wood is laminated together with a special glue to create really large beams of wood that are very strong. They're also fire resistant. They have a lower carbon footprint.
One of the other issues
mass timber is now becoming stronger, and so it can be used to build higher and higher buildings.
So this could be
previous to a couple of years ago, the highest building you could build in the United States out of timber was 6 stories. Now you can build 18 stories. So we're going to start seeing high rises built entirely of wood. It's pretty amazing. At Readlight says, it will be interesting to see how the value of oceanfront property changes as sea levels continue to rise.
Ooh, this is a good question.
This will be really interesting. So far, though, it really hasn't affected home prices. At Schmohawking asks, what is redlining? It's kind of come to signify any sort of racial discrimination in housing, but actually there's a really specific history around redlining.
There are lots
this
of
is a
things
redlining
people like
map
to say
from
about
Cleveland.
race
In the
in the United
1930s,
States,
the United
but
States federal
redlining
government
was real,
decided to
guys.
start a
This
new
was
mortgage
real.
program to allow home buyers to access federally backed
Luckily, it doesn't
mortgages.
exist
The
much
government
anymore.
created these maps to determine where their investments would be safe. Green areas, where you see down here, is where the federal government felt that their money would be well used. They also created a D class or red class, which was really a no-go zone where the federal government did not want to provide government-backed mortgages.
And this has also contributed to the current housing market, and just, everything kind of builds on one another. And you have these areas that weren't targeted for real estate development, and these urban cities have grown now, and you have these low-income populations who are kind of being pushed out by companies moving in, and all this kind of builds upon itself. But this video is kind of long, so we're going to stop right there. If you guys liked this video, leave a like, leave a comment, and let me know that you want to see the next one. If this video gets 5 likes, I'm going to finish it. I'm going to make another video. We're going to finish talking about this. I also do one-on-one financial coaching, so if that's something that you're interested in, click the link below. Get that scheduled. If you need help getting a house, getting out of debt, whatever you need financially, just want to get educated, figuring out how to do your taxes, I'm here for you. I got you for free. Click the link below. Get in on that. Hope you guys had a good rest of your day. Peace.